There was a child in your house, Gekir, that nobody saw. She was there, physically present, but emotionally non-existent. This child learned not to need anything, not to ask for anything, not to expect anything. Because every time she tried to be seen, she was ignored. Every time she tried to speak, she was interrupted. Every time she tried to exist, she was treated as an inconvenience. That child was you, and you don't even know it. Because invisible children don't know they're invisible. They think it's normal. That's just how things work. That they don't deserve attention. Carl Jung called this one of the most devastating forms of emotional abuse, not because someone screamed, not because someone hit, but because someone simply didn't see you. And what isn't seen doesn't exist. Today, I'm going to reveal the 3 unmistakable signs that you were the invisible child in your family. Signs that you've probably normalized. Signs that you probably don't even recognize as wounds. But they are wounds. Deep, silent, and still open. Why, and most disturbingly, these wounds are shaping your adult relationships right now, without you even realizing it. Before we continue, I need you to understand something. The invisible child is not the same thing as the rejected child. The rejected child knows they exist, knows they're hated. There's a relationship there. Even if it's toxic, the invisible child is worse. She wasn't even important enough to be hated. She simply wasn't. Jung wrote extensively about what he called mirroring, the fundamental need that every child has to be seen, reflected, recognized by their parents. When a baby looks at their mum, they need to see in her eyes that they exist, that they matter, that they are real. This mirroring is what forms the sense of self, of identity, of worth. Without it, the child doesn't develop a solid sense of who they are. She grows up with a void, a permanent doubt, a feeling that maybe she shouldn't even be here. You recognize this. I know you recognize this. Now let me explain how invisibility works in a family. Generally, there's a specific dynamic. There's the child who gets all the attention, the golden child, the star of the family. There's the child who gets the negative attention, the scapegoat, the troublemaker. And there's the child who gets no attention, the invisible one, the one who learns to exist in the shadows. You might have thought you were lucky, that you escaped the drama, that you stayed out of the line of fire. But you didn't escape. You paid a different price, a silent price, the price of never having existed for the people who should have seen you first. Jung explained that the shadow is formed from what is rejected, ignored, unseen, and in the invisible child. Practically everything goes into the shadow. Your desires, your needs, your emotions, your dreams, everything that could make you be noticed. You learned to hide, because being noticed was risky. Being noticed could bring negative attention. Being noticed could make you lose the little space you had. So you became a master at disappearing, and now you don't know how to appear. Let me talk about the first sign that you were the invisible child. First sign, you feel uncomfortable when you receive attention. This seems contradictory. Children who haven't been seen should want attention desperately, right? Some do, but many develop the opposite. They develop a deep aversion to being the center of attention. Birthday parties that are about you, compliments directed at you, achievements celebrated by you. All of this causes discomfort. It's not humility. It's not modesty. It's a visceral feeling that something is wrong, that you shouldn't be receiving this, that at any moment someone will realize you don't deserve it. Jung would call this an internalized complex. The invisible child didn't just learn that she wasn't seen, she learned that she didn't deserve to be seen. And that belief became part of her identity. You may have success, you may have achievements, you may have a life that seems enviable from the outside, but inside, you're still that child, waiting to be discovered as a fraud, waiting for someone to finally see that you shouldn't be receiving this attention, that you're not worthy of it. This has a name: imposter syndrome. But the root isn't professional. The root is familial. The root is a home where you learned that your existence was optional. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Ashley. Ashley was 42 years old when she finally understood why she could never accept a compliment. Every time someone said something positive about her, Ashley automatically diminished it, changed the subject, deflected the attention. Her husband got frustrated. "Why can't you just say thank you?" Ashley couldn't explain. Until she started therapy and discovered something about her childhood. Ashley was the middle of 3 sisters. The oldest was the brilliant one. The youngest was the artist. And Ashley was Ashley. No label, no identity, no defined space. She remembered dinners where her sisters told stories about their days, and her parents listened attentively. When it was her turn, her dad was already looking at his phone. Her mom was already getting up to get dessert. Nobody interrupted Ashley. Nobody was rude. They simply didn't pay attention. And Ashley learned. Her stories weren't interesting. Her life wasn't important. She stopped trying. At 12 years old, Ashley was already an expert at not bothering anyone, at not needing anything, at not existing. And now at 42, she was still an expert at it. Accepting a compliment meant accepting that she was visible, that she mattered. And that idea was terrifying, because if she mattered, then what happened in her childhood was even more painful. So, it was easier to believe that she didn't deserve it. This is what Jung called ego defense, a way to protect yourself from even greater pain. If you never deserved attention, then not having received it wasn't so bad. But if you did deserve it, then what your parents did was devastating. And recognizing that takes courage. Ashley needed 2 years of therapy to be able to say, "My parents emotionally neglected me, not because they hit me, not because they screamed, but because they simply didn't see me." And that was abuse. Silent, invisible, but abuse. Second sign, you learned not to have needs. This is perhaps the most devastating. The invisible child quickly learns that her needs will not be met, not because they're explicitly denied, but because they're ignored. She cries and nobody comes. She asks and nobody listens. She has needs and no one notices. So, she stops needing, or rather, she stops recognizing that she needs. The needs don't disappear. They go into the shadow. And the child develops an identity based on not needing anyone. I can do it myself. I don't need help. I'm fine. These phrases become mantras, and in adulthood, this person becomes hyper-independent. Hyper-independence isn't strength. It's a wound. It's an inability to ask for help, an inability to be vulnerable, an inability to trust that someone will be there. Because in childhood, no one was. Carl Jung wrote about the repression of needs as one of the most profound forms of fragmentation of the self. When you deny your own needs, you deny a fundamental part of who you are, and that denied part goes into the shadow. It becomes something shameful, something to be hidden. Needing someone becomes weakness. Asking for help becomes humiliation. Being vulnerable becomes danger, and you live a life where you seem strong on the outside, but you're falling apart on the inside, because humans need other humans. That's not weakness. It's biology. It's psychology. It's reality. But the unseen child was taught that she was the exception, that she had to be the exception, because no one would come to help her anyway. I met a man named David who exemplifies this perfectly. David was what everyone called self-sufficient. He solved everything alone. Never asked for favors, never accepted help. People admired it. So independent, they'd say. But David's wife saw the truth. She saw a man who couldn't be vulnerable, who couldn't share difficulties, who carried the world on his shoulders. and refused to let anyone help. It was destroying their marriage, because intimacy requires vulnerability. And David didn't know how to be vulnerable. When David was a child, he was the third of 4 kids. The 2 oldest were problematic. They were a handful. They demanded constant attention. The youngest was the baby. He needed care. And David learned not to need. He dressed himself at age 4, made his own lunch at 6, walked to school alone at 8. His parents thought he was mature, independent, easy. They didn't realize they were creating a child who internalized that his needs were a burden, that asking for help was wrong. That existing was only acceptable if you didn't bother anyone. David carried that for 40 years, until his wife gave him an ultimatum: either you learn to let me in, or I'm leaving. And David was finally forced to look at what he had buried. He wasn't independent. He was an abandoned child who learned to survive alone. And that survival became a prison. Third sign: you have difficulty knowing what you want. This is the most subtle and the most confusing. The invisible child not only learned to hide their needs, they learned not to have them. Or rather, they lost contact with them. When no one asks what you want, you stop knowing. When no one validates your preferences, they disappear. When no one recognizes your feelings, you stop feeling them. Carl Jung described this as a dissociation from the true self, the part of you that knows who you are, what you want, where you're going. That part was abandoned because there was no space for it. So you developed what Jung called an adaptive persona, a mask that molds itself to what others want. You become what's needed, what's convenient, what doesn't bother anyone, and you completely lose track of who you would be if you could choose. This appears in subtle ways in adulthood. Where do you want to have dinner? I don't know, you pick. What do you want to watch? Whatever you prefer. How do you want to spend the weekend? Or I don't care, whatever you want. It seems like flexibility. It seems like being easygoing. But it's a void. It's an inability to access your own desires because those desires have been silenced for so long that you don't even know where they are anymore. A patient I'll call Sarah illustrates this perfectly. Sarah was 35 and had a successful career in something she hated. When I asked why she chose that profession, she said, it's what made sense. Not what she wanted, what made sense. To others, to society, to her family. Sarah had never stopped to ask what she wanted, because Sarah was the unseen child. Her older sister was the ambitious one. Her parents were always talking about her plans, her achievements, her bright future. Sarah was 2 years younger, and no one ever asked what Sarah's plans were. She learned to copy, to follow, to do what seemed right. And when she had to make her own decisions, she froze, because there was no me inside to decide. There was only an echo of what others expected. Working with Sarah was like archaeology, digging up layers and layers of expectations to find something genuine underneath. And when we finally found it, Sarah cried, because she realized she had lived 35 years as a stranger in her own life, following a script that wasn't hers, playing a role that no one asked for, but that she assumed because it was the only space left. That's the legacy of the invisible child, not knowing who you are, because no one ever asked you. Now let me talk about something even more important. What happens when the unseen child grows up? They usually follow one of 2 paths. The first path is the perpetuation of invisibility. They find relationships where they continue to be invisible, partners who don't see them, superficial friendships at jobs where they're just a cog in the machine. They recreate the family environment because it's what they know, and because on some distorted level it's comfortable. The pain of invisibility is familiar. The pain of being seen would be new, unknown, terrifying. So they choose what they know, even if it hurts. The second path is overcompensation. They become desperately visible, seek attention in exaggerated ways, do anything to be noticed. They may develop narcissistic behaviors as a defense. If I can't be invisible again, I'll be impossible to ignore. But this visibility is false. It's a persona, not the true self, and underneath it is still that unseen child, waiting to be seen for who they really are, not for the show they're putting on. Carl Jung wrote that individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, requires integrating what has been rejected. For the unseen child, this means something very specific. It means learning to occupy space. It means learning to have needs. It means learning to be seen. And that is terrifying, because it goes against everything you've learned. Your survival depended on being small, on not bothering anyone, on disappearing. And now you need to do the opposite. You need to learn to appear. This doesn't happen all at once. It's not a moment of revelation. It's a process. Slow, painful, necessary. It starts with small things. Saying what you want for dinner. Asking for help when you need it. Accepting a compliment without deflecting. Occupying space in a conversation. Each of these moments is a victory. Each of these moments is a rebellion against the programming of your childhood. Each of these moments is you saying, I exist. I matter. I deserve to be seen. And slowly, the invisible child begins to appear. Not all at once, but little by little, like someone emerging from a dark cave into the light. The eyes need to adjust. The skin needs to get used to it. But eventually, you get to see the sun and realize you always deserve to see it. Hold on to that, because the most important part comes now. Now, let me explain why invisibility is so destructive. Many people minimize emotional neglect. At least I wasn't hit. At least there was food on the table. At least I had a roof over my head. These phrases are traps, because they compare abuse with neglect in the wrong way. They are two different kinds of wounds. Active abuse leaves scars that you can see, that you can name, that others can recognize. Neglect leaves emptiness. It's like trying to show someone a hole. The hole is defined by what is not there. How do you prove that something didn't exist? How do you explain that you were destroyed by absence? Carl Jung understood this profoundly. He wrote that the human psyche needs certain nutrients to develop: attention, validation, mirroring, recognition. Without them, the psyche doesn't grow correctly. It's like a plant without light. It may survive. It may even look normal from a distance, but it's weak, distorted, desperately searching for something it never received. The unseen child is that plant. It grew. It survived. Maybe it even achieved external success. But inside, something fundamental is missing, and that something is the certainty that it deserves to exist. You can have everything in the outside world, but if you don't have that, nothing seems enough, because you're trying to fill a hole that was dug before you had words to understand. Let me talk about how invisibility affects romantic relationships. This is crucial, because it's where the wound most often appears. The invisible child usually attracts one of two types of partners. The first type is the narcissist. This seems ironic. The person who was ignored ends up with someone who ignores them. But it makes perfect psychological sense. The narcissist offers something the invisible child never had: intense attention. In the beginning of the relationship, the narcissist does something called love bombing. He makes you feel seen, special, unique. And for someone who has never been seen, this is like water in the desert. It's intoxicating, addicting, impossible to resist. Of course, the narcissist's attention is conditional. It's manipulative, and it eventually disappears. But at that point, the unseen child is already trapped, because she's returned to familiar territory, the cycle of being seen and then ignored, the dance she's known since childhood. The second type of partner is the emotionally unavailable person. Someone who is physically present, but emotionally absent. Someone who repeats exactly the parental pattern. The unseen child chooses this partner because it's comfortable, not in the sense of pleasant, in the sense of familiar. She knows how to behave in this space. She knows how not to need, how not to ask, how to exist on the margins. It's easier than learning something new, even if that new thing is a healthy relationship. Healthy relationships require visibility. They require you to appear, to show who you are, to occupy space. And that's terrifying for someone who learned that appearing was dangerous. So she chooses what she knows, even if it hurts, even if it destroys her slowly, because familiar destruction is preferable to the fear of the unknown. Now let me reveal something that few people talk about. The invisible child often becomes one of two types of parents. The first type is the parent who tries to compensate. He gives his children all the attention he never had. This seems positive, and often it is, but it can become excessive, suffocating. The child of this parent may grow up without their own space, because the parent is filling their own void through the child. The second type is the parent who repeats the cycle. He becomes the invisibilizing parent, not intentionally, not maliciously, but because it's the only model he knows, and because his own wounds haven't been treated. Carl Jung was very clear about this. What is not made conscious becomes fate. If you don't look at your invisibility, you will pass it on. Your children will receive the same absence that you received, and the cycle will continue. As painful as it is to recognize this, it's the truth. The wound that isn't healed is the wound that is transmitted, from generation to generation, until someone has the courage to stop it. That someone can be you. Now let me explain how to break the cycle. First step. Recognize. You need to admit that you were the unseen child. This isn't victimization. It's honesty. It's looking at your history with clarity and saying, "This happened to me." Many people resist this. My parents did the best they could. It wasn't that bad. Others had it worse. These phrases are defenses. They protect you from feeling the pain, but they also prevent you from healing it. Jung said that what you resist persists. What you don't acknowledge continues operating in the shadows. Recognizing is the first step to taking the wound out of the shadow and bringing it into the light. Second step, feel. After recognizing, you need to feel. The anger that was repressed, the sadness that was denied, the loneliness that was normalized. These emotions are there, waiting, and they need to be felt in order to be released. This isn't pleasant. It isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Many people skip this step. They want to go straight to forgiveness, to healing, to moving on. But you can't heal what you haven't felt. You can't release what you haven't acknowledged. The path is through, not around. Third step, reparent. This is an important concept in depth psychology. Reparenting yourself means giving yourself what your parents, what your mom and dad didn't give you. The attention, the validation, the mirroring. You become the parent you needed. This might seem strange at first. How can you give yourself something you've never had? But it is possible, it's necessary. It starts with self-compassion, with talking to yourself like you would talk to a wounded child, a shadow child, with validating your own emotions, with meeting your own needs, with seeing yourself, hearing yourself, recognizing yourself, gradually. The unseen child inside you begins to feel seen, not by others, by you. And that changes everything. You realize you've just been given some of the most powerful tools for understanding a wound you might have carried for decades. But the journey doesn't end here. This channel exists to illuminate the shadows that society prefers to ignore, to give voice to the children who grew up in silence, the forgotten children. If you felt that this video spoke directly to your story, the Super Thanks button down below isn't just a donation, it's a way to say, this truth needs to continue being revealed. Each contribution allows more people to find the answers that you are finding now. You're not just a spectator, You're part of something bigger, a movement of people breaking generational cycles, breaking family patterns, breaking family scripts. Step 4. Practicing visibility. After doing the internal work, you need to practice in the external world. This means choosing to be seen, actively, consciously, repeatedly. It means speaking your opinions, even when they seem irrelevant. It means occupying space in conversations. It means asking for what you want. It means letting people get to know the real you. Each of these actions is a small revolution. It's you saying, I exist, I matter, I deserve to be seen. In the beginning, it's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel scary. Your programming will scream that you're doing something dangerous. Ignore the programming. It was created by a child trying to survive. You're not that child anymore. You're an adult who can choose differently. Step 5. Surround yourself with people who see you. The invisible child learned to accept crumbs of attention. Any recognition felt like a banquet. But you deserve more than crumbs. You deserve people who genuinely see you, who are interested in you, who want to know you. This might mean reevaluating your current relationships. Some of them might be replicating the family dynamics, the family roles, people who keep you invisible because it's convenient for them. These people might not be able to make the journey with you, and that's okay. You're not obligated to maintain relationships that perpetuate your wound, your scars. Even if they're old, even if they're family, you have permission to choose to be seen. Let me finish with a story. I knew a 50-year-old woman named Carol, who spent her entire life being invisible, in the family, in the marriage, at work. She was the person who made everything work, and nobody noticed. At 48, she had a health crisis that forced her to stop, and in the silence of the hospital, she finally saw herself. Saw the child who learned to disappear, the unseen child, saw the decades of invisibility, saw the cost she paid, and decided she wouldn't live another day like that. She started therapy, started talking, started showing up. It was difficult, uncomfortable, scary, but it was liberating. At 50, she said she was really living for the first time. Not because the circumstances changed, but because she finally allowed herself to exist. You don't need to wait for a health crisis. You can start now. You can look at the 3 signs we discussed and recognize which one applies to you. You can allow yourself to feel the pain that was denied. You can start the process of reparenting the invisible child inside you, your shadow child. You can practice being seen, one small act at a time. Invisibility doesn't have to be your destiny. It was imposed on you when you were a child. But you're an adult now, and adults can choose. Choose to be seen, choose to exist, choose to occupy the space that was always yours by right. The invisible child inside you is waiting for someone to finally see her. That someone is you. If this video touched on your wound, comment down below. Did you recognize yourself in any of these 3 signs? Which one was the most painful to hear? I read all the comments. And sometimes, being seen starts here, in this space, with people who understand because they went through the same thing. Until the next video.